Hey, Glenn here, the People's Carpenter. I'm sorry this coat rack has taken so long to finish. There have just been other things going on. Assignment, starting a new course, working on a project around the house that I had to do, building a firewood shed, so I decided to record that and you'll see that shortly as well. But here it is. It is finished. And here's how I finished it off. Okay, so this new bit from Amana, which I've tried out on another piece of wood and produces nice results, is hopefully just going to clean up the route that I've done here. It's a subtly different size radius, but it's very close, so it won't look too different. That went pretty much as I would hope. There is still some darkening from burning going cross grain, but it's going to be much easier to remove than it was before. Certainly that's a much smoother cut, so that's good. There is ultimately no escaping the grunt work of lots and lots of sanding. So I've taken a look at some examples of pieces like this, and one thing that I've noticed is that pieces of carpentry from this era generally were not glued together, or certainly not as often as you would expect today. You know, you watch any YouTube woodworker who's making modern pieces, and they'll glue things together and perhaps also brad nail them or screw them or something else as well. Victorian pieces and Edwardian pieces were generally just screwed or nailed, at least when it comes to the pieces that I've seen that resemble this. Maybe I'll discover that there were lots of other pieces that were glued as well, but I'm still on that journey. So I'm going to follow suit. However, the decorative pieces that go on the face here will be glued. It's the large joins between the structural pieces of this that will be just screwed. So I don't necessarily have to do what I'm about to do, but I'm going to do it, and that is I've got these fine panel pins, and I'm going to hammer them in just behind where this circular piece will sit. And some of you who do lots of woodworking may know what I'm doing. Others of you are about to find out. I'm going to snip these pins off right above the surface, so that what's left here is a couple of extremely short spikes. I don't want those to be very tall at all. They're not doing anything when it comes to holding objects together, but what they will do is jab into the back of this when I press it down and hold it in place, so that when I'm gluing it, there's no chance of this circle moving around and ending up attached in a place that's not quite where I want it. Now, I'm not using any actual measurements using a ruler or anything when I do this. I'm just using this piece here, and I'll use it again when I attach these pieces to put some space between this object and the top of the board. Okay, so we're looking at about that distance, and I'm using this to again just eyeball this object in the center that a ways, and I'm doing that by making sure each edge is about the same distance from this central hole here. So that's just under a thumb, and again just under a thumb, so that's about the location that I wanted. So I'm just going to push this down now. In fact, I will give it a few taps. Now it's flush on the surface and it can't move, but it can be lifted off like so. So when I glue this, I will just move it around a little bit until those spikes find their hole again. I'm not putting the glue on thick at all, I'm spreading it very thin because I would like to avoid squeeze out if possible. That's just something that I'll have to clean up afterwards. I may not avoid it completely. There we go. There we go. That reassuring, although very quiet, click as it went down. Now, do I try and glue all the pieces on at once? No, I won't. I'll come back later and glue on the other pieces. Alright, that looks good. I can just see the white of glue, but it's not really squeezing out. I think that's good. Okay, I'll come back tomorrow and glue the other pieces on. And just gluing on the last piece now. Okay, and that's all the gluing that's going to be done on this project. The rest will simply be screwed. Alright, exciting times. We're now on the home stretch and we're going to look at attaching all these bits and pieces. I'm putting down masking tape. Oh, it's not long enough, silly. Just because I want to mark some positions of holes. And I don't want to be drawing on the wood any more than I really need to, because then you're going to have to, I don't know, typically sand it off, and this might make my life easier, maybe. So I'm just going to get some basic positions marked out. I'll make that all together about 64 centimeters, 32, I know that much at least. 32 is halfway. The holes in the wall will be 59 centimeters apart, just because I've checked on the wall using a stud finder and a fine drill bit, and I know that I can safely put holes 59 centimeters apart. What's half of 59? 29.5 centimeters either side of the center will give me 59 centimeters altogether. I know that maths is right, but I'm still going to check because my measurement might be a bit imprecise. Good, that's right, 59 centimeters. I should probably wait until those fixtures have arrived, because those are going to be plates that I'll be screwing onto the back, and I don't want to put any screws through the top, which might interfere with those smaller screws. Yes. But how many screws am I going to put through the top? So, one at each end. Is 3 enough? No, I'll use 4. I'm doing things in a slightly old school way, obviously not entirely, because I've been using power tools the whole time like just then, but it's an old school design, and I wanted to use an old school tool which just arrived. So this is an old Stanley bit brace. Yes, it's a brace that holds bits, and when you're using them together, this is a bit and brace. I'm just going to use this to countersink my holes. And you can be fairly precise with this. I was able to count 8 turns. There's no way I would, well, I suppose I could, but it's much easier to do that with a hand tool than with a power drill. I'll give it one more. 9 turns. so this is going to be sitting exactly here. Okay, so these pieces are each going to be held on by just 2 screws, one through the back, one through the top, and those screws will in turn help hold this overall structure together, of course, because the screws will be going through the back piece and the top piece. Oops, other way around. And additionally, there will be 4 screws going along the edge here, holding this top on. I've been able to drill 2 of those holes. I want to wait before I drill those ones until the fixtures arrive, just to make sure that I'm not making objects interfere with each other. Okay, I've just got it sitting in this awkward position just because of where the clamps are. This works best. Now the screws that I'm putting in here are these nice brass screws with slot heads. Now slot heads are kind of uncommon these days when you buy screws. It's much more common to have a Phillips head, or the, is it Robertson? I forget, the square socket in the top of the head. The slot head screws are much more traditional, which is of course what I'm going for here. See, when it comes to actually using them, I don't prefer slot head screws at all. It's so much easier for your bit to slip out and to damage the screw and to potentially stab yourself or something. See, just there I slightly slipped out and marred the screw, because brass screws are not as hard as stainless steel screws. But traditional look. Oh no, I can feel what I've done. I've sheared the head off. That is snapped because of the amount of force that I'm having to use. But I wouldn't really be comfortable with a larger hole. I'll be able to recover this, but I guess maybe I should wax the screw when I put it in to lubricate it a bit. I think that's going to be the thing to do here. I'll show you what I've done, because I could just feel the head spinning there without the whole screw attached. Here I see, broken the top off. What's the bet now that in taking this one out I'll snap that as well? Yeah. Oh, you know what? I jolly well have. Lesson learned here. Look, bother. Lubricate your screws. Okay, so I managed to grab one of them and twist it out. The other one is just too short. Every time I grab it, I just end up clipping the end off slightly. So I've zoomed the camera right up, and I'm trying something I've never tried before. I've got my smallest plug cutter, and I'm basically cutting out a plug of wood that contains the screw. That really should work. And then I will use a larger plug cutter to cut a plug to insert into this hole. And there we go. Never done that before, but it seemed like it should work, and it did. Now I'll just get a twist drill bit to make sure that is exactly the size of one of my plug cutters, and then I will cut a plug and drill that in, and then proceed with a little bit more caution this time. Unintended, but there we are, warts and all. So this is becoming a somewhat more involved process than intended, but sometimes that's life. There, now it's a glue with some mud to it to fill the gaps, and I'll put a little bit of glue in the hole as well. And the thing is, I've watched furniture makers and fine woodworkers talk about the need to lubricate your screws, put a bit of wax on them so that you don't break the heads off. And I just managed to rather expertly ignore it. There's no teacher like a bad experience. Right, and I will use a clamp to draw that in rather than bash away at it. Now I'll give it a few bashes. Yep, I've demolished the top of it, but that's okay. So I didn't make an end grain plug. That is an edge grain plug, so that the grain, well, it's not going in the same direction, but it's the same type of grain on the surface there. Oh, now I'll just let that dry and then cut it off, and then we'll get back to our scheduled program. Right, it is the following day. Let's just saw this flush and we should be on our way. And there we are. A nice solid hardwood edge grain surface once more. Okay, so let's re-drill pilot holes and get screwing. Right, I've got my screw this time and I've plunged it into this Voodoo Molly vintage wax, which is a furniture wax I use. It's beeswax based, although there's probably more than I need on this screw at the moment. I wasn't certain if I could drill a larger pilot hole. I wasn't entirely comfortable with it, so I double checked the dimensions and there was room to go very slightly larger. So for a 10 gauge screw I've now got a 4mm pilot hole. The overall diameter of the screw is just fractionally larger than that, and I've tried it out on a scrap piece of wood and it seemed to go well, and I'm all lubed up. So here's hoping that I don't have a repeat performance. Feels much easier, but not loose. Like it's still, there is still grip as it goes in. And I've just made the countersink a little bit deeper as well. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, I mean it's good practice to lubricate screws in general, but as I mentioned earlier, I don't think I edited out of the video, I'm not sure, but brass is certainly softer than a stainless steel screw, so it's even more important in this case to lubricate your screws. Well, good news, the hardware has arrived for hanging this thing, and the hardware consists of these plates here. This is not the screw that I will use to hang it on the wall. This is very small, but it just happens to be sitting here. So it slides onto the screw on the wall and then hangs thus. So let's mark their position. No, this way up. So adjust. I'm not using a marking knife for these edges, although I suppose I could do that as well. I'm just cutting a line of about 2 millimeters with my chisel. That's looking pretty good to me. There we go. Now I'll do the same thing on the other side. It's time to start applying some finish. I can't apply it to all pieces because I still have to make some adjustments to the top shelf piece when the hanging hardware arrives, but we can make a start. Right, I'm using Danish oil. Now Danish oil, not every can or bottle of Danish oil you buy will be the same as the one you bought last time, unless you get the same brand. And that's because Danish oil is a blend of wood oil of some kind and urethane, polyurethane. I'm also told that lots of different companies have very different cocktails that they put together and call Danish oil. I actually haven't checked what sort of oil this one is. Does it say? I know I've used it before and it looks nice, I'm just not certain. No, it doesn't say. But it can be linseed oil, it can be tung oil, it might even be something else. I don't know, but it looks nice. Now, in principle, you could make your own equivalent of this, blending oil and polyurethane. I've done that before, but I think these guys know what they're doing and I'm quite happy to use what they've made. I'm just applying it with a paper towel. You apply this stuff very thinly and it will take about, well, as many coats as I like really. I imagine it will not be more than 4 coats, but once we get there I will make a decision. Immediately it makes the wood just look more beautiful, makes the grain pop, as they say, which is to say that it increases the contrast between the grain and the rest of the wood. So we're 6 coats in and I think that may be where we will stop. Alright, I know this video has taken a long time to come out, and part of the reason for that is that I've had another project on the go, not in the workshop, but building a firewood shed. And so I decided, look, if I'm going to be using the workshop for other purposes, using my time for other purposes, I may as well record it just in case anyone is interested in that. So I don't know if this video or that one will come out next, but that's the reason. I'm just rubbing this down fairly gently with some superfine steel wool, quadruple 0, and that's just to take off any bits of dust that got caught in the finish, any tiny bumps. Alright, now I'll get out a brush from my brush and shovel, a nice soft one, and just brush all these filings away and then move on to the final step of finishing. So the last thing I'm going to do in terms of finishing this coat rack is applying some wax. And it is winter, I'm going to soften this. It smells really good too. I don't know what else is in it, but it smells slightly citrusy. And I'll just apply it with paper towel. Now, I guess hot water is the remedy for this. So, the wax has been on there for about half an hour. Now I'm just going to buff it off. What I should get, because it appears to be really good and has a reputation for being very good, is a lamb's wool polishing pad to go on my polisher. That, fight number 1, takes some of the work out of it, although there isn't that much work I suppose, and also produces a great result. I can definitely see why you might prefer using a lamb's wool pad on a polishing machine. Did I say that it's not actually much work? Kind of is actually. Putting a bit of elbow grease in here. I I guess we've arrived. Let's do this. And that's it. We've finished. I certainly like the way that it turned out. Every now and then I think I can see a little bit of wax. Maybe I'll just have to go over it with the buffing cloth and check a few times. But there we are. My first really retro looking piece that I've made. And I would call it a success. Okay, now one final thing, just a matter of interest when it comes to tools. Given that I'd started making this, I thought, these things are easy to make, maybe I'll just make one of these occasionally. And so alongside this one, I started making another one out of Limu. It isn't finished yet, I can see it sitting on the floor down there, but I spotted something interesting when it comes to router bits. So that's a thought that I'll leave you with before I go. But until then, please come back next time. The journey will continue with another project. I guess it'll be that coffee table that I'm working on. Bye. I just wanted to pause for a moment in a project that I'm doing, another coat rack, this time using Rimu rather than oak, just because I've got some recycled Rimu sitting around. And I wanted to comment, this is a roundover produced with the Amana bit that I talked about earlier in this video. And it feels super smooth, but as you can see, there is some prominent burning as it goes across the grain. I've started cleaning this up, that's why it's not as bad, but it was definitely there. On the top piece, however, I'm using this much cheaper Chinese bit that I got on eBay direct from China. I forget how much cheaper. It was about half the price, I believe. And this piece of Rimu is pretty much identical to that other one, and there's just no burning at all. It also has 4 blades, but I guess they're just a lot sharper. It's a better quality bit. So look, don't assume that the more expensive bits will always be better. Sometimes that's the case. Thus far, I have consistently found that to be the case with Radian bits, although I haven't used one of their roundovers yet. But it's not always the case. That Amana bit is just nowhere near as good as this cheaper Chinese unbranded one. And because these things are not just made for Instagram, but for real life, there it is.